So, yes, it is a bit chillier, and as always, take a little bit more care, particularly as you start up, because want to make sure that the body's prepared. So, rubbing your hands together, and then tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. The other side. Upper part of your chest. Your belly. And then your legs. Good, and then sit back. So we were just saying before we started that these tapping exercises are actually quite useful exercises for us. They're a very straightforward way of warming up. And something I was saying to a class yesterday, and I've said probably to all of you at some point, but it's worth repeating, is the importance of that preparation, both mentally and physically. And example I always give to people is if you look out your window, especially early in the morning, you see people dashing around and they're carrying bags and they're running for the bus and they're late for work or school or dragging kids along and just doing all sorts of things that if you said to any self-respecting sports person, could you just go and do sort of like show us how this is done, they wouldn't do it without a warm-up. Nobody takes their field of sport without a warm-up, because we all know that not warming up properly is a very common cause of injury, pulled muscles, strained joints, and so on and so forth. And yet we actually don't do that to ourselves. We can be very active, or we can got to go down the shops, and then you wonder later in the day why your back's hurting or something like that. So just as a standard thing, preparing yourself for the day is really important. And with Tai Chi as well, of course, it's not just the physical preparation, but the mental preparation, just taking that time, just a few moments maybe, to center yourself, to root yourself, to get that sense of quietness. Otherwise, the day just seems to be very, very frantic. So just letting yourself sit back, using your awareness of your weight, of the pull of gravity in your body, of your posture, of your breathing, to both actually get to a point where you can start to work creatively with those. And also just for the benefit of being aware of them gives you, which is that your thoughts begin to settle and quieter. Probably, if you're like the rest of us, certainly like me, what will happen is you'll settle down and then suddenly you'll remember, something you've got to do, something you did yesterday or something you've been thinking about. But the process is very simple, really. Every time that happens, you will recognize, suddenly you're drifting away, your attention is drifting away. Bring your attention back to, again, weight, breath, posture, so on and so forth, until that becomes just a natural process to you, that to come back to this centered feeling, this quieter feeling in mind and body, is as natural to you as taking a breath in after you've breathed out. So that quality, that quieter quality, those physical qualities of alignment and rooting are things that become much more part of how we do everything. Then bring your feet in, come forward slightly, and go through the same process again. In the end, with Tai Chi, we can work out that quietness, that sense of being rooted, and the activity and the busyness and the reaching out are actually two sides of the same thing. So it's not either or, but rather both working with each other. So again, your hips sinking down, weight slightly forwards, and this time that feeling of draining away, of dissolving all the way through your body, straight downwards. Rib cage dropping, shoulders dropping. What is hopefully a familiar feeling within your body of a bit more space building up. And as that happens, just slowly beginning to move within that space. Again, as always, starting with the turning of your head. And again, in the first instance, we should be thinking about how much space is there for the movement, rather than being too quick to try and develop that space, to build, increase that space, which is a useful aim and an important aim. But it's one that tends to be fulfilled quite naturally with this approach to the movement. Feel as though your neck's being very gently massaged and eased. And so the increase in movement is just a natural consequence of that. And shoulders. Remember, neck and shoulders, upper back, can often be very tight. And often when it starts to get a bit chillier, we sort of hunch over, don't we? So nice and easy and gently. And then going forwards. And hands out to your sides. And winding around. Imagine the pillars either side of your body. Sliding the palms of your hands around them. And as with so many of the movements that we do, we begin to imagine just a very slight resistance. Just, if you did have a metal or a plastic pillar there, as you slid your hand around, there'd be a little bit of friction between your hand and the pillar. It would just slow you down slightly. And that should encourage more of a sense of what's happening in your chest and your upper back as you make this movement. So this is something that develops for us out of that quieter attention. It's hard to use an image to help you with the movement if you're wondering what you're going to have for lunch or whatever is distracting you. And then winding around. So you're winding up string now. Still with the same sense of connection, fingers to wrists, wrists to elbows, elbows down into your ribs, ribs down into your hips. Oh, sorry, I missed out the shoulders, elbows to your shoulders and shoulders to your ribs, ribs to your hips. See how easy it is to miss something out. Just jump ahead. And then back the other way. Rest your hands, ease forwards, and push back. Turn a little. And then in the other direction. And then around. And then back the other way. Back to the center. One knee up. Raise the toes, push out, plant the foot forwards, heel toe, and then back. So by planting, not just putting the foot down, but a little bit of a push into the ground, very gentle. I've described this in the past. I don't know if you're walking on soft sand, for instance, or if you're, perhaps the best example is if you're walking in the sea or in a river or something like that. Just a little bit more careful about how you place your foot, because it could slip, or if you're walking on ice or something like that. And then back. And part of it is do this on the other side, is actually softening a little bit in the sole of your foot. Obviously, shoes are going to make a difference. The surface that you're walking on is going to make a difference. But if you're holding your toes tight, if you're holding the arch of your foot tight, which we often do, then you're less likely to make that good contact. I always think it's quite interesting that animals like polar bears have these big sort of like fluffy feet. I know they're not, I know there's a bit more to them than fluffiness, but there's a softness there because it means that on the ice they can get a better contact. And it's like if you walk over a hard floor in a pair of shoes that's got a very stiff sole, it can be quite slippery. If you walked over the same floor in a pair of very soft trainers or something like that, you'd feel firmer, and so on and so forth. So try not to hold your toes really tight. It's a very common thing to happen. We just don't realize that we're doing it. And particularly standing, but also seated. Sometimes they say it's as though your feet are melting in to the floor. They're just allowing them to spread out. Be warned, your feet can change size. In the time that I've been doing Tai Chi, I've gone from shoe size sort of 7.5 to 8 to shoe size 9. I've got very wide feet, so it's quite tricky. But my feet have grown in the time that I've done Tai Chi. So hands down at your sides again with the image of the pillars, but this time they're going to move with you a little bit as you go forwards. Same thing as before, using the whole of the upper part of your body to move your arms so that your arms and muscles of your shoulders and arms right down into your fingers help to create a shape to express the movement, the transfer of your weight, and that opening and closing in your chest and your upper back. Setting a process of movement, a chain of movement that we want to try and feel throughout the exercises. It's encapsulated in this phrase that one part of the body is in motion, the whole body is part of that motion, is engaged in that motion. And then sitting back, fisherman casting net. Then imagine the ball in front of you. Over. Keep going with this. Just realised I need to put a notice on my door. Keep going. So same thing, rolling the ball in. Otherwise somebody's bound to come walking in. Again, we're using an image here, an idea to help to create the movement. If you imagine the ball there, gives you an idea of what you want to do with your arms. In fact, what we're doing is here, I get to this point. Oh, see if I can show. Yeah, I get to this point. You see where my arm is. Now, if I come back, I actually don't change this position until I get to here and my elbow drops down. So I go forwards, my arm hangs forwards there, and then I come back, and relative to my body, it remains the same until I get to here. Don't be too rigid about that, but try that. And as you get more familiar with that way of doing it, You no longer have to think directly about doing it that way. Notice what's happening in your back, right up from your hips to your shoulders. Notice the sensations in the front of your body, because they're all indications of these very subtle movements that build into the big movement. And one way or another, it's not an exact science, but one way or another, you're actually going to be using those sort of movements and that awareness of the movement when we come to movements like Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky. So this is a good exercise to practice, to understand how we can begin to get to a point where we can push our arm up without straining in our shoulder, for instance. And then back, pigeon spreads his wings. And then pushing away. One more time. And your hands rested. Turn your hands out. And bringing your hands in. So when you use our feet, use our hips, feel those changes, expanding and contracting, belly, back, ribs. Feel the movement upwards and downwards that's moving our arms for us. It's not that we're not doing anything with our arms. We're shaping the movement, directing the movement, complementing the movement, certainly. But it shouldn't feel a strain in your shoulder. In fact, as your arm goes up and down, see if you can just feel right deep in the shoulder, the rotation, because this is a rotating movement as the top of your arm, the bone there, rotates in the cup of the shoulder. If you can't feel that, it's probably because you're straining, stiffening to lift your arms, or it could be. There are other reasons why you might not feel it. And then changing again. So that becomes even more important with the wild goose, because your arms out from your body like this are going to be more difficult to move. You're going to be more aware of the weight of your arms, more likely to feel your shoulders starting to ache fairly quickly. And yes, we can use the image, we know that, to help with that. But if there's still a physical straining in your shoulders, your arms will begin to ache more, your shoulders will begin to ache more. You get less benefit from the movement. So we really want to feel this rhythm of expansion and contraction and how that develops through the upper body. And then easing forwards, parting the clouds. If it's the flow of the movement that attracts you, which it often is, and there's nothing wrong with that, you should realize that you'll get a better flow if you work in this way. Important though it is, the flow of the movement are like the blooms on a flower. They're not going to be right and not going to be as good as they could be if the roots aren't good and if the stem is damaged, for instance. Now go back to the first of these, rooting down, one of each, because you'll find that a large percentage of each exercise is similar to the other two. And then the variations will make themselves more apparent to you. Because these small, subtle changes in the body are much more likely to be influenced by your awareness, by imagery, by ideas, memory, and so on and so forth. By focusing more on them, you end up producing the movement from inside out rather than from outside in. And that's a significant development in these arts. One more time. And then dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Okay, one more. And then both hands pushing in two directions. Again, as you switch from one part of the exercise to another, from pushing up to pushing out, notice the differences. Train your awareness to be sensitive to these little nuances within the movement. We do this a great deal in our lives. If you go and put the kettle on in your kitchen, chances are at some point you'll be moving towards the kettle just before it boils because the sound can change. And there's lots of little instances in areas that we're familiar with where we notice differences of one kind or another with one or other of the senses. The more familiar you become with these exercises, the more potential is there to do that within your own body. and then push out and turn. Around. Scooping the sea and looking at the sky. Feel the contact that your heel has with the ground beneath it. And then change into grasping the tiger's ears. And then on the other side. And then grasping the tiger's ears. more time. Bring your feet back and circling around, letting your hand follow the movement. Doesn't matter which hand you use. If it's your left hand, you go forwards and then over to your right and back and then over to your left. If it's your right hand, it's the other way around. And then let's try that with the other hand. So you're going to change the direction that you're turning here. So with my right hand, I'm going to swing out to my left and come back to my right. That's the direction that my body's moving in, and that's the direction that my hand is moving in. And then this time, alternating in a nice smooth fashion. Stirring the beans. Again, that awareness of what is happening within your body. Your weight, your legs, your hips, your back, your belly will help to guide your hands. If you're simply trying to do this by following with your hands, you become really confused very quickly. Two circles overlap essentially. And rest. Again, rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. And your arm. The other side. Part of your chest. Belly. And your legs. And then stand. So again, what we want to do when we stand is imagine you're standing on sand and you're just allowing your feet to sink into it. And often what we notice is we're sort of really stiffening in that. And so there's this almost melting away. It's not the end of the process, by the way, because otherwise we just end up flat-footed. But before we can sort of get some kind of definition of shape in the foot without straining, we have to cease to strain. So it's quite difficult. And it's, you know, I mean, if you happen to have sort of like hard skin or corns on your feet or something like that, it can be even more difficult to be honest. So, you know, give yourself time to adjust to this. But if I'm holding my foot very hard, this foot will slide around. If I let my foot soften, there's just more resistance there. It's quite strange. So think about that. Every now and then, just bring your attention to your feet, sinking down and then changing. And then parting the clouds. One foot forwards. Remember, plant the foot. Gently push into the floor. Transfer your weight. And maybe even just think about that gentle pressure downwards just before you move the weight each time. So here, the weight in the front, just find the ground with your back foot and let the weight follow that movement. Same thing as you go forwards. And then using your toes and your heel. And when you're ready, move from that to the step in. So it's heel, toes, press down, gently let the weight go in. Bring the back foot in. When you step back, it's the ball of your foot, then the heel, gently press in, go back. And the other side. Then using your toes and your heel. And then stepping in. Now, one foot forwards and fisherman cast the net. So remember those changes and movements through your upper body. It will help you to keep a quieter quality, a more flowing quality, a more effective quality in your arms. And then add the stepping in. And then on the other side. And with the step in. if you're putting too much effort into your arms, straining in your arms, it's going to make your stepping more problematic. You're more likely to sort of wobble around if you're stiff in your arms. So all these things, the step in, the awareness of movement in the upper part of your body, are all significant in lots of ways. Bring your feet back. Excellent. Go back to your chairs. So this, as always, I think highlights the importance of our awareness, because I'm constantly talking, be aware of your feet, be aware of this happening in your body, and so on and so forth. I'm not talking about thinking about it. I'm not talking about so think, oh, I've got to do this with my foot and things. Sometimes we do that, but we want to get to a point where we're doing it without having to think about it. There's still awareness there. If somebody rings on your door and you go to answer the door, you don't have to think, oh, right, where's the scratch? Okay, I'll put my hand out and I'll turn it to the right. But you're still aware of what you're doing, because if you're in a different house and in a friend's house and they say, oh, could you answer the door? You get there and think, oh, where's the, oh, the latch, oh, hold on, I'm turning it the wrong way, because you haven't got the background awareness that tells you how to do it, apparently, sort of unconsciously. I suppose it is unconscious in a way. Subconscious might be a better way of thinking about it. So when we repeat movements, when we repeat actions, we become that more aware, and that awareness gets hardwired into our system. And that's why we repeat things so much in Tai Chi. Practice doing this, pushing the foot into the ground, and eventually there'll be an impact on how you walk down the road, and so on and so forth. Practice working with these internal movements and awareness of these in internal movements consciously, and eventually you'll unconsciously use them when you open a cupboard and you reach up to a shelf to get something off it. You're less likely to strain, you're less likely to hurt yourself. So they have very practical outcomes, these things. So now just let your hands drop down and embrace tiger, return to mountain. Take your time, just finish the cycle that you're on and come to rest. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. I have to say that went very quickly for me today, so it's strange how that happens, isn't it? It can vary. Hope that was useful to you. As always, do feel free to ask.
Thank you very much. Bye all.
Other than that, take care, everybody. Look after yourselves, and
Yeah.
I'll see you soon, I hope.
Yeah.
Bye-bye then.
Bye.
Bye.